guys, we are live here back once again in the booth for the top deck for the top deck team with our 2024 BSF tier list now for the premium and V-Premium formats. Once again, I am Anton and I have here.
I'm Joe. So we are going to go through our choices for V Premium and Premium. So BSF 2024 this year is very weird because it is a tri-regulation format wherein three players in a team played three different formats at the same time. So compared to BSF and in the previous years wherein you are allowed to play three decks of for V Premium and Premium, now you can only play one deck for each. So
Yeah,
it will be a very weird meta. Wouldn't you say so?
it's gonna be very weird because again, this is the first time this is happening. The tri regulation. They have tried it in Japan, but still for the English side, this is gonna be a super weird meta because most people are usually expecting to be facing at least three decks of the same format, but now you're gonna have to be just expecting at least one of them.
Yeah, so I
Because
think the meta here will be very different because you are now expecting the best deck in the format and maybe a deck to counter the best deck in the
yeah, I think
format.
that's gonna be the number one issue here. Which decks are the auto slot ins or the best decks to be brought, or which decks counters it, or just very good comfort pick. So again, I think Anjo start us with the ball here.
Okay, so I think the auto slot in here for we will be starting with V Premium. V Premium is largely unchanged, so therefore I think really one of the auto slot index is Tavas. Tavas has not lost anything. It has not gained anything. It still is the best deck in the format for me. I think a lot of people have learned that it's very reliant compared to the other decks. But once you get the ball rolling, it is an Axel deck.
Yeah, it's still an Axel deck. It still does like ungodly amount of attacks. I believe it can do 7.
Yeah,
if,
that's what I-
it just depends on how many markers you have on the field. But once again, you're just restanding with 20,000, 30,000 power. Just the stride effect of Tavas is just super strong
Okay.
into, yeah. Lambros is just broken at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's right. So next would be for me is no, not yet. Luard. So basically, if to beat an Axel deck, you have to play the Force deck, right? So Luard is the premier Force deck in the format. It never lost anything. I think it did gain something, right?
Yeah, recently it just got unbanned. The cards that was
Name?
previously banned got unbanned. Yeah, I think it was the main and a G1. I forgot the cards.
Yeah,
It's
I
been
forgot.
so long.
Yeah, I forgot, but the card was unbanned for. Oh no, it's the counter charger.
Counter
Oh,
charger, yeah,
there you
the
go.
counter charger.
It's a counter charger. So yeah, Loard is very strong right now. It got top 8 in the recent World Championship. So yeah, this is going to be a triangle basically.
Yeah, basically, it's just gonna be what is the best force deck, what is the best axle deck, and what is the best protect deck. And for the most part, this is by and large the best force deck. Just in one turn, you create 3 force markers, and in what world is that fair?
Okay, so what's next for you then? What is the best protect deck for you then?
There is nothing else but the protect deck that actually gets bigger numbers than force. I mean, I don't understand this deck. Why in hell is this protect deck making bigger numbers than force decks?
Yeah, so basically this is a protect deck with force numbers and axle number of attacks, which is very stupid and very weird. But yeah, Nitros is Nitros. It's very hard to play compared to the other decks, compared to Tavas and Luard, because you have to set up your resources properly. But once you get your resources, it has almost the best of all worlds. So I think you told me you had one more deck to be put in the auto slot in. So why don't you take it away then?
Oh yeah, would be the outlier in the triangle format. Gurguit is not necessarily the strongest deck. It did win world championships. However, if you go first and you ride at least twice, you're just taking the win out of nowhere. Just because of how strong the deck is, especially with how it abuses the Axel 2s. being able to just give plus 10,000 to the whole front row and calling any number of units, being able to attack as many times as you want, with especially with the combos in this deck, with using the dragon to call another unit, using basic Sagramore to call another unit. You're basically attacking like 10 times, and no opponent can basically block all of those attacks. And that's just how unfair Gurgwit is. And we need to respect Gurgwit and do not. And if you lose the die roll, you basically also lose against Gurgwit.
Yeah, so I think that's the top four decks we have. The other decks here will be Has a Place. These are not necessarily worse than the top four, but if you are going to play, if you do not have a choice, you might as well play these instead. So one next for me would be Vanquisher. Very close to my heart. I got second place with it in the most recent BCS 2023. It's still a very good deck. It's still a very strong deck. It's the same as Tavas and with Gurgwit, but more reliant on your hand cards and your pieces.
Yeah, what else can we say? Axel 2 is just broken. It draws you a cards. It gives you plus 5,000. And especially this deck, not being CB reliant means it can run the book. The CB3 book that makes you draw 3 and give 3 units plus 10,000. This is the only deck that can effectively make use of that order card. And what else can I say? It's a restanding Vanguard. It has multiple attacks and it has big numbers. It's basically just a good deck.
Okay, so next for me is one deck that's really fallen off the meta for some reason. It did not lose anything, but I don't know why people have stopped running it, and it is Leopold Reverse. So Leopold Reverse used to be a very strong presence in the metagame, particularly in the previous BCS meta. So I don't know why it dropped off, but it's still very strong. It still gets a plus 5,000 in the front row, and it still gets that crit pressure for free.
Yeah, it's still a very good deck. I think most people were just saying that it counters one of the most the strongest decks at its time. I'm sorry, at its time, which is Steam Maidens. When the Steam Maidens got hit, people basically gave up on this deck because there is no longer anything for it to counter. But it's still a pretty strong deck. It still does magic numbers. It still pushes out results. But I guess people just lost trust in it. But again, it has a place in your V-Prem slot. And another deck that I think is still a very strong deck is Astral Poets, which is the Astral Poet. Astral Poets is still a deck that can easily make 5 force markers and has a rear guard that can drive check for 5 that depends, like 1 to 5 times. It's just a strong double Vanguard attacker, and I think most people just don't respect it much. What about you, Anjo? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Astral Poet is still one of those decks wherein you just get your force markers early and you just beat your opponent with it. And so another deck that just gets force markers for free and beat your opponent with is Anj. So Anj is just, yeah, that's just the deck. You just create your force markers, you call your Tiruas, and you beat your opponent's face with it. Again, I don't think the deck necessarily lost anything, but I do realize also that people have learned how to counterplay with this deck. But if you do draw into those Pearl Sisters early, yeah, your opponent just loses the game.
Yeah, Bermuda Triangle getting the Pearl Sisters early is just straight up unfair, especially when Anje is able to return them to the hand, and then you call into the what's the call, the restander, Tirua. Yeah, Tirua, or the any of the other restanders they have. It's just basically unfair if they go first. And of course, they make 2 force markers out of nowhere. But yeah, Francis here is a master with Astral Poets. It's good only if you write it up at all. But at the end of the day, it's just a good deck. You making 5 force markers. You have a very big rear guard that can drive check up to 5 times. It's just a very consistent deck. And another consistent deck here is, I believe, would be Melkut. Melkut most people did not even expect that this deck is good because it came at around the tail end of the V series. But it is very consistent. It had a lot of results, and most people just don't expect that you are intercepting for 70,000, 80,000, and it is just good defensive pressure and as well as offensive pressure from the Vanguard attacks. What do you think, Anjo?
Yeah, fine. Malkot is one of those decks really that I think people tend to underestimate. I do get Anton's placing for it, especially since it does get to beat the offensive capabilities of decks such as Luard and Nitros. But again, it's one of those decks that is hard to play. So that's why you have to be really good when it comes to playing this deck. But if you do find a player that is good with this deck and knows how to play this deck, then it is a very good luck for your team. So do you have any other deck you think has a place in the current slot for the VPrem?
Yeah, I think this would be a final has a place in the team, and that would be Charlotte Amon. It never lost anything. It's still a good deck. It still has the most egregious anti PG or anti guarding mechanism with the what's the name of the card?
Number in terror. I
Yeah,
think,
the number in terror, making you guard with 3 cards at the same time. So it's basically no guard or you're forced to overcommit into guarding, especially when it's just small attacks. And that's the problem with this deck. The fact that it still has the anti-guarding mechanisms, it still hasn't been banned. It still is a prominent force in the metagame, and you still need to accept that you will be playing against this.
Okay, so time to move on to the
Yeah.
comfort picks then, yeah? So for me, one of the best comfort picks in the deck is the previous boogeyman in the meta, which is Steam Maidens. Steam Maidens did lose a lot after the recent bannings, but it's still a multi-attack deck. It still has the force generation. It's still multi-attacks, and it's still good, really. You do have to accept that it's no longer as good as it was, but at the end of the day, it's a force with multi-attack.
Yeah, it's still just a force with multi-attack.
Okay, so another force with multi-attack is Revengers. So this deck was never seen as a very high meta pick, but again, being able to restand with your Vanguard multiple times and getting to stack those force markers into your mid lane and checking the yellow triggers just makes you win the game.
Yeah.
So Revengers is still another comfort pick. It won't be as what do you call this? It won't be as consistent as compared to the other decks in the list. But if you are just good enough at checking triggers, you will be winning a lot of games at this point. Another would be Melody. Melody is another deck which is you just generate as much resources as you can. You with its ability to create any additional gift that you want, which is for Axel or Protect, you can pick and choose whichever you want. You can pick and choose whichever you need, whichever you want. And actually, Melody can actually also get those weird. Also has the anti-guarding mechanisms. They will create 70k, 80k lanes that you have to guard 3 cards out of.
Mm-mm. Yeah, and I think another comfort pick here would be the Chaos Breaker Dragon. It doesn't have a way of making markers, but it has a way of countering markers in which it removes the opponent's markers, and sometimes removing markers is just a death wish, especially for Axel clans. If they don't have access to their markers, you're basically lowering down the ceiling or the floor of their the ceiling of their attack patterns. So the less markers they have, the lesser chances of they have of winning, because they will need to rewrite into another Vanguard again, and then you remove it and they need to rewrite again. So basically it's just a game of attrition.
Okay, so another comfort pick here for me is Glendios. So I guess this is really dependent on your local meta game. But if ever you feel like the meta in your field is not reliant on your multiple Vanguard swings, then this is the deck for you. Just lock down your opponent's front row, and they will never get to play the game ever again. That's Glendios in a nutshell. It's more control compared to CBD, but once you do lock down, your opponent is not going to be able to play.
Yeah, basically.
So, what is next here? Another deck for me for comfort pick
Yasui? Yeah.
would be Yasue. So I think people would say this tends to be a high roll deck, but I tend to disagree. Axel 2 is just Axel 2.
Yeah, Axel 2 is just Axel
If
2.
you create multiple Axel 2s and then you call your Shirayukis and then you minus your opponent's Vanguard, they won't be able to guard all of those attacks. So yeah, just create your Axel 2 and attack multiple times. Okay, yeah. So I think this is also another deck where people will say that tends to be a high roll deck, but it's more consistent compared to the other high roll decks in this in this list, which is MFD. If you feel like you're a good MFD player, then you can consistently hit that 20 card bind, then this is the deck for
Yeah.
you.
In the words of CJ, you don't get the next turn. And it did happen.
Yeah, and also in the words of Sean, MFD best deck. Okay, so
I think move on.
yeah, no, I think I have another one deck.
Okay.
So this is
Enigma.
so these two really. So
Uh-huh.
this is basically just DP. Just stack your force markers, attack, swing with your Vanguard multiple times. They're basically the same deck, but Enigma gets to keep their trigger checks because you're just restanding with the same Vanguard, but DP has to rewrite from the hand. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess we're moving on, or is there anything else?
No, I guess we have to move on then.
Yeah, I think. And we're now in the high roll territory. These decks just need you to check those yellow triggers because they will do most of the work. And here we go, the number one shotgun, Himiko. Himiko, you not having perfect guard is equals to GG. It will use its effect, stack 3 critical triggers on it, and then if you have the perfect guard, you lose. If you have it, you win. If you don't have it, you lose. And that's basically the power of the Himiko shotgun.
Okay, so another deck here is, which one is it? This one, Vowing Saber Reverse. So basically, this deck, the high roll here is hoping your opponent gives you the 4 damage. So basically, you have a 12 attack combo, but you need to have like 4 or 5 CB available. So basically, this is a high roll if your opponent doesn't know how to play the game against you. So once you do get that high roll, if you get all the pieces wherein you are able to get your units that buff themselves, such as Zuitan or that one dragon, I forgot the G2, then you just win the game there, basically.
Yeah. So going back to the shotgun route, we're going with Ashley Reverse. This is another shotgun deck. You just make force marker as force 2, putting a critical to your Vanguard, and then make it as big as possible using the G1s, and then using its skill to make it also as big as possible, and praying that your opponent doesn't have enough grade 0s in their hand, because the effect itself denies your opponent from using Sentinels. So if they do not have enough cards to guard this, it can shotgun the hell of their opponent from 1 to 6. And that just makes it very strong. Especially it's a very aggressive deck early on. So if they cannot if you do not win from the aggressive route, you can just shotgun them into the win instead.
Okay, OTT, as we saw in the recent shop challenge, just check your yellow triggers and win game.
Yeah, you just check the top card of your deck. Oh, it's a hit. It's a critical trigger, and that's the power of OTT. You just check the top of your deck, and yeah.
Okay, again, DOTX, check yellow triggers, win game.
You're restanding Vanguard, put it all on the Vanguard, restand, you win the game.
Yeah, so that's basically just DOTX in a nutshell. It's less consistent than DP as a restanding Vanguard deck because you don't get the same power increases with your Laurels because DOTX doesn't have that. But it gets to attack more times than DP does, so yeah. So another high roll deck would be Fenrir for me. Although I wouldn't say it's necessarily a high roll deck, but it does. It's really matchup dependent. That's what the high roll I think would be saying. It's really good against the Axel clans or multi-attack clans because you do get to control your opponent's board at an opportune time with the G2 promo and the with the furry VAnguard there.
Vanagante,
Yeah,
yeah, Vanagante.
but against most decks, it doesn't really get to do that much. So it's really dependent on on what deck you do get to play against. And then again, and also this one,
The Highlander.
Highlander is it depend really. It's still good. I would put it high. I would consider it more also of a comfort pick, but uh, not checking your G-Force is a death wish. Also Spectral Duke, basically. So,
Yeah, I think that's it. That's the high roll decks. Basically, high roll, you just put everything into your Vanguard, restand, and then hit them again. So now we have in the final tier praying to the gods. And what does that mean, Anjo?
basically don't play these decks. If you're ever playing these decks, I hope your teammates know that you're trolling at that point.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah. So this is Nobatama. Basically, this is just Mizukaze. Hope and pray you win. So yeah, basically that. It's just Mizukaze. Victor is also that deck. Although to be fair, it did get a lot of power with the new promos.
With the new promos.
But then again, the deck just really needs a lot of help. Also, Shirayuki.
Yeah.
Deck needs some left. So I think I'm very okay with this tier list. How about you, Todd?
Yeah, I think the tier is fine. I can move some up into the has a place. I can move some down to high roll. But at the end of the day, it's still dependent on you as a player on what do you think is best for you and your team.
Yeah. So time to move on to premium then.
Yeah, so we're now done with the V Premium. We're now going into V Premium, and here we go. I think we already pre-made the list here to save us some time. So, what do you think, Anjo? Do you think this? What about this? We can just go with the.
Yeah,
This first is Neo Nectar.
Okay, so basically, Neo Nectar is since you're only going to play against one deck in the format, one deck per round. It's very obvious to just play the best deck, which is Neo Nectar. So this is basically French Katrina. This deck is very aggressive, very self-reliant, and then can just easily turn off your opponent's turn with Megaloma. So this deck is bad for BCS because it's a very wide metagame. You don't know if you're going to randomly play against Mega Colony and lose to it. But since this is Teams format and you can only play against one premium player per game, and you know they will be playing basically Neo Nectar or mirror matches most of the time. So yeah, Neo Nectar is the best deck for that.
Yeah, and of course, the second best deck is still from the zoo. It is Mega Colony. Mega Colony has never really stopped. It's still one of the best decks just because of the power of the Stride, which is, what's the name again?
Gridora.
Gridora, I keep forgetting, but it's Gridora. Gridora doesn't allow you to call units other from your hand. So that means no free calls from the drop zone, no free calls from the damage zone, no free calls from the deck, and especially the most egregious effect, you cannot call G guards. And if you cannot call G guards, that means your defensive options are shut and you no longer have any ways of blocking all of those attacks. And that's the power of Gridora. Basically, Mega Colony is equals to Gridora. The moment they ban Gridora is the moment Mega Colony loses its power.
So basically, this Mega Colony pick is dependent on if you think that Neo Nectar is going to be the best deck in the format. So basically, these are your two counters. If you think that the metagame is wide open, then pick Neo Nectar. If you think there will be a lot of Neo Nectars, then pick Mega Colony. So we put also Grand Blue there in the high tier because again, it only really loses to Mega Colony. But to be fair, the deck is hard to play. It's very hard to play properly, basically. So, but if you do understand how to play this deck, if you know the ins and outs, then it's basically a skill expression in a nutshell, and you will be able to 50-50 most decks in the meta with
Yeah.
Grand Blue.
Grand Blue is still just Grand Blue. It has a lot of options, especially with bad bounty, restanding a Vanguard, activating the effects of Nitros to attack again, or even use some builds even using the Break Ride. So yeah, it's just Grand Blue. It basically just V-Prem Grand Blue playing into Premium Grand Blue with access to stronger strides and stronger units to be called. So I think that's it. we're now going to has a place on the team, and of course the number one has a place on the team would be Link Joker. Link Joker is just one of those decks that tries to counter everything. If it can, it will try to counter Katarina. It will deny Katarina the circles to place all those tokens, all those units. And if it can control Katarina, you're basically guaranteed the win. You also have the option of going into Chaos Breaker Dragon to deny your opponents their markers. And basically, that's just it. That's just Link Joker. It's a control deck in a nutshell, and you just deny your opponent any resources and any ways of winning the game.
Okay, so next here is Narukami. It recently got hit in the most recent ban list, but it's still a very good deck. I think there are two main builds on how to build this, which is Sweep Command and Devouring Reverse. So Sweep Command decks is very reliant on the Stride. I forgot the name, and then the latest Stride, which gives plus 10,000 for every open rear guard. Yeah, not the Demolition is UN, and then Devouring Reverse is more reliant on being able to play the Demolition Dragons for a very high stun verse turn. So both decks have shown that they are good. Both decks have shown that they can top 8 despite the recent hits, but you do understand really that this deck has been hit, and it will still feel like the deck is no longer as good as it was once.
Mm-hmm.
And so next year is Nova Grappler. So shout out to Steven Lay, top 4 in the Bushiroad World Championship. It really showed the world how good Nova Grappler is in the right hands. This deck used to be very weak, but with the recent updates to the strides, so Vic 10 you are now able to accelerate Axel markers with your Vic 10s, which makes this deck very, very good as of right now. So what's next?
No,
That's Subatama.
that's your deck.
What? Okay, sure.
I know, that's Shiranui, yeah. Basically, yeah, it's the same with Victor. Shiranui got an upgrade, especially with the new Strider effect that makes 2 force markers. But of course, the most important part is the fact that it no longer needs to hit to activate the effect. So you just attack with it and force your opponent to discard. And basically, that's just, you're playing the old Nubatama, not the dominate build of Nubatama. You just keep on attacking with that Strider, and you just keep on forcing your opponent to discard. And then you have the combo with the what's the name again of the card that calls that you cannot call. No, is that
You can't call?
no, the discard until 3 cards. The forgot the name.
It's card of 3 cards.
Or is it banned?
Si Jacometsu, no, banned.
Oh, Jacometsu is banned.
Chicken,
But
yeah.
still, the deck
Mizukasa,
is
basically,
Mizukasa, yeah. So basically, the deck is just stronger overall because of the recent updates or the recent erratas that was given by the latest set, the premium, history collection. I mean,
Yeah, basically. So this is the next deck would be Gear Chronicle. So Gear Chronicle also updated by the latest erratas. It can now generate 2 to 3 force markers in a turn, and then you just have a very good Steam Maiden core with the premium cards. So basically, this is just V Premium Steam Maiden, but with better cards, basically. So you are able. So yeah, that's really just how the deck works. You are able to play your multi-attack cards. You're able to play more attacks, more weights to gain resources, but you have more force markers available.
yeah. And speaking of V Premium, we are going to Bermuda, and this is basically just V Premium Highlander, but with access to the stronger cards, especially in the old formats, and with Heltruda, one of the best strides for Highlander. It's basically still just Highlander V Premium. You stride into Heltruda, or you go into Reindeer, and then you activate the effects to search for the Highlander, for the one-offs in your deck, and hope you ride into Anjay, into other grade 3s, and basically just abuse whatever effects those new ride makes. So this, again, you're just basically abusing the V Premium shell, but making it stronger with the strides accessible in this format, and especially with the G Guards that is still strong in this format. So what's the next clan, Anjo?
So that is Gold Paladin. So basically another V plus deck for the format. Since the recent since the ban list, you are now unable to play Ultima with an overtrigger. So people are now playing Gold Paladins with Gurguit as their finisher. So you're with the most again with the recent updates to the strides, to the on hit strides, you are now able to create two two axle markers in your first stride turn, and then with cards that are banned in V Premium, such as what's his name again? The Bluish Flame.
Oh yeah, Percival.
There you go, Percival. Yeah,
Percival, yeah.
with cards like Percival, on your second stride turn or in your second turn, you can now have like 4 to 5 extra axle markers, and then Gurguit just gives your called units plus 25k for some reason. So
Yeah.
yeah, basically a really strong deck. Still very strong, but you do need to survive into that second stride turn. So the next here is Genesis.
Genesis, yeah.
Basically the first and second place in the World Championship. You have the Regalia build and you also have the Fenrir build. So basically, personally, don't play the Fenrir build unless you are very good with it, because it can play until time, and we don't necessarily want that for the BSF 2024 meta because of the recent update of the rules. There are no longer any extra time given for extra turns given for time. You will be given an auto loss, so a double loss. I mean, so Regalia is a safe play. You have multiple restands with your Angelicas and your Norns.
In your first stride.
Yeah, on your first stride, and your rear guards are safe from being affected by your opponent's units because of Yggdrasil's divine gauge skill, right? Or Yggdrasil, or yeah, Angelica's divine gauge skill. So yeah,
Specs.
yeah. So now next to the comfort picks.
Spec.
Yeah, that's picks.
Okay. So now with the comfort pick, we have the Spike Brothers. And we say Spike Brothers, but it's actually just copying Gridon in the rear guard. So you're going first with the Rising Ace. I forgot his
Rising.
Rising Nova, I think his name. I forgot the name. But you activate the effect to make two markers, Force 1 and Force 2. You copy Gridon, and because Gridon is a Dark States unit, it can be placed in any Dark State nation deck in Premium. So using Nova to copy into the Gridon and having another rear guard, you basically just copy each other's effect, and then you activate. Forgot the name of the card that passes the marker. Basically, that's just it. You copy Gridon, and then you just pass markers around. You don't even need to stride. That's the power of this deck. It just wins by riding grade 3 and copying Gridon. But of course, this is a comfort pick. It's not necessarily a high roll because you can easily search for those cards. But you need to be very consistent with this deck because one wrong move or one wrong decision can spell the end for you. So what's next, Anjo? I think that's
so
Shadow
next
Paladin.
is Shadow Paladin. Most people would say that this deck is no longer as good as it was in the meta, but it's still Shadow Paladin. If you can high roll into that Morfessa first stride, you can still win the game with it. But I'm not mostly talking about Luard. I'm also I can also say the same about RFD. So basically, RFD is just a Chain Rancor deck. You call all your G1s, you stride into Chain Rancor, you swing with your Vanguard multiple times, and then hope your opponent dies to Chain Rancor's effect that they have to guard 3 times with everything. So that's basically just a deck in a nutshell. This is a comfort pick because it's very hard to play into that win condition, but once you do get into your Chain Rancor turns, the deck just plays itself basically. So another deck here is Aquaforce. Aquaforce is a very strong deck. With your Tavas core, you have a very good first GT ride with your Tavas into Lambros, and you have your very good late game strides with your Alexandros and the like. But the main issue for the deck here is really your first stride turn, because not a lot of Megalanicas, not Megacalica, not a lot of Aquaforce strides are very good in the first stride turns, nor can they push for game. Most of Aquaforce first strides are just resource generators. So that's really the main issue for the clan.
And here we have next would be Dimensional Police. And why is this deck here in Comfort Pick? Simply because Laurel is still a thing. It's basically the same deck as V-Prem. You put everything into your Vanguard, make it as big as possible, and then Laurel here is just to force through either the V series Laurel or the OG G series Laurel. It's just pressure after pressure onto your Vanguard. It's basically it. If your opponent doesn't have a perfect guard, you can easily win. But yeah, it's the power is just tied into the Vanguard, and you don't need anything else. But of course, again, as a comfort pick, you need to know your matchups. And next is OTT, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, that's his OTT. OTT as a deck is a very good comfort pick because again, it's the same as V Premium. You can just check the top of your deck, fix your deck, and check yellow triggers. And especially in Premium, where you have G guards, in G guards, and their G guards has an effect to check the top card of the deck. And oh, it's an over trigger. I think Anjo felt that in last tournament.
Ichikishima also is a thing. So being able to stop your opponent from playing half the defensive cards in their deck, which are grade ones
Yeah.
and G guards,
G-guards.
that's just very good. So yeah, OTT is hard carried basically by Ichikishima.
Ichikishima and Coco, I think, the witch that can restand. So yeah, they have a lot of offensive pressure. So next would be
That is Kagero, which is
Kagero.
basically DOTX. So I think a lot of people would say that this tends to be a high roll deck. I would tend to disagree. This is just DOTX, and you just swing with your Vanguard multiple times. But when you have the premium, support, and you have the DOTX Legion. So yeah, this deck is just better in premium compared to V Premium, and it also has the best G guard in the game, which is the Denial Griffin.
yeah, the Griffin just
Okay.
ending games. And this is Pale Moon,
Also, next here is Pale Moon. So I think this was Harry was shown to be good as a deck by Derek Dow in the most recent in last Manila BCS 2023. This deck tends to be a safe counter pick if you feel like your opponent, there won't be a lot of Mega Colony in the meta, which yeah, we think here the BSF 2024 won't be. So it is a very good comfort pick if you do know how to play that deck.
Yeah, and
So-
I think that's the end of the comfort picks. Now we're back. We're now going to high rolls, and first would be DI, the Dark Irregulars. Of course, it's gotta be Death Anchor. And Death Anchor has been a prominent force in the early premium format, but ever since the Assassin ban, it has been slowly lowering in the tier list, but it's still creeping up just because of how high rolly the deck is. Being able to attack 5 times when your opponent is still at grade 2 is just annoying to deal with, and that's how high rolly the deck is. Basically the matchup is just how well do you check into triggers.
Yeah, and also with D support with the Barrow Magnus and the counter chargers, this deck is just really really good. So it's mostly a knowledge check when you play against DI. If your opponent decides to give you 1 damage, then yeah, you're in danger. Okay, so next here is Murakumo. Murakumo is very weird. It's a very high rolly deck. It's very you win the die roll, you ride into your Yasue, you draw 13 cards, and then you plop down all your Shiryukis and punch your opponent 13 to 15 times. So the deck is a meme, but it is a very good high roll, and you have to respect that high roll.
Yeah, that is. Speaking of high roll, here we have Royal Paladin. It's basically just a V Premium, and you're using Crystal Luster to go into your V Premium Vanguard. So this is just V Premium Plus. You're not necessarily playing any of the new, any of the old premium cards except for Sword Me, because Sword Me is just broken. But most of your core deck is V Premium, and you just go into what's the name again? Salome to drive check 4 times and then activate Crystal Luster's effect that your opponent cannot guard unless they use 2 cards. They call 2 cards at the same time, and then you just drive check 8 times and then give all of your effects to the rear guards. So whatever you drive checked 8 times is basically the power of your deck. If it's all blanks, then you lose. If it's all triggers, then you win. That's basically the high roll.
Okay, so next here is praying to gods. So we basically just put here Tachikaze and Angel Feather because they have shown some results in BRO 2023. Tachikaze has some multi-attack combos, and Angel Feather does have that Celestial build, wherein you are also able to shotgun with your Raphael.
And also guys. There are also a guys
Yeah.
build for the Angel Feather. But yeah, it's still just... It relies too much
Yeah, there's
on everything. Yeah.
it just relies a lot. It just requires too much. But you have to keep it in mind this decks, especially you, John Hamilton. You lost to Tachikaze in BCS. Okay.
And
so,
of course, I think we don't really need to talk about this, but do not touch Great Nature. The deck's just bad. I don't know what they're planning to do with the deck, and I hope they do fix it. But at this moment, at this time, there is no reason to play this deck. It's just a mishmash of cards that do not work with each other.
yeah, so I think that's it for us. So basically, the premium meta would be Neo Nectar and Grand Blue, and decks that counter Neo Nectar and Grand Blue, which is
Mega Colony.
Mega
Yeah.
Colony.
So, Anjo, what about you? What is your perfect team
For
for the try format?
for the try format. If I were able to choose, I would probably pick something like Shiranui, Neo Nectar, and Neo Nectar for premium, and then something like a Luard for
V-Prem.
V-Prem. Yeah.
Wow, okay. That's pretty balanced, to be honest. For me, I would play... I want to make a pure Bermuda team. Because Prisms is good in Standard. Anje is good in V-Prem. And Highlander is still a strong deck in Premium, with Derek Dow even having success in Thailand, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Thailand. But yeah, I think a pure waifu team is not only a pure waifu team, but also a very strong team heading into the BSF 2024 meta. So yeah, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Not really. No. So I think that's really all for today. So if you think there are some things in our tier list that you want changed, maybe we put some clans higher or lower than you expected, then put your reasonings in the comments, and then yeah, just post your reasonings in the comments, and maybe we'll see. Maybe you can change our minds regarding some things.
Yeah.
Maybe there are some combos that we haven't thought of yet.
And of course, if you want to practice some premium or V premium, don't forget to visit us here at Top Tech Games, third floor of Grand Central, and see you guys next time.